Hello, friends. Thank you for joining me again as I continue my journey to paint along with all 403 episodes of The Joy of Painting featuring Bob Ross. Today's painting is titled Winter Sun. Bob's palette is somewhat limited for this episode, but this will be the most colorful winter scene that we've done so far. The painting features a glowing sun shining down on trees, bushes, and a lake. The shadows are done in red, so the whole painting feels comfortable despite all the snow and ice. I hope you're enjoying Series 2 and some of the changes that I've made to the production. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And as always, please help this little channel to grow by clicking subscribe. Now put on your parka, because you're going to need it. Let's get painting. Alright, so off we go. And I'm getting a little bit of Indian yellow just on the one corner of the brush there. We're going to start by putting a nice glowing sun up here in the sky. Just doing some swirls up there. Now I flip the brush around and get some permanent red on the other corner of it. You got to be careful with permanent red because it's a very strong color. And maybe just a little bit more of the Indian yellow. And now with the two different colors on the brush there, I'm going to go in and make some crisscrosses. And while I'm doing this, I'm trying to keep the red towards the outside and the yellow towards the inside. Of course, this episode of The Joy of Painting is titled Winter Sun, and so the sun's going to play a real starring role. And I'm just kind of trying to blend it together now, still trying to keep the red towards the outside, except along the bottom there. But just create kind of a hazy effect in the sky. Now I'm going in and picking up some Prussian blue and a little Van Dyke brown. Going in to the farthest corner there and just starting to put crisscrosses in there. Pick up a little bit more blue there. Want a nice dark color, but you definitely want it to be blue and not brown. You have to be really careful too when you're putting this on, because you don't want to accidentally mix the blue and the yellow and end up with green in your sky. It's not a real natural look and just doesn't look right. Going into my odorless paint thinner there. Just getting the brush nice and clean. Shaking it off. And beat the devil out of it. I accidentally unplugged my headphones there, so I have to get that reattached real fast. I've got an earpiece just on the left side there that runs up the back of my shirt, and I accidentally hit the cord and unplugged it there. Now just going in with a clean dry brush and blending it all together. Like I said, being careful not to blend the yellow and the blue, but also doing my best to get rid of all the white space in the sky. And so I'm trying to keep my blending towards the center part right now. And now you can see I'm starting to move out a little bit. And I'm not going to go back into the center now that I've got the blue on the brush. until I go to blend the whole thing, which I will here in just a moment. For this painting, I used two 2-inch brushes, two 1-inch brushes, the palette knife, and the script liner, which this time I wrote in big letters, underlined. I didn't want to forget it like I did last time. Now, this painting is a winter scene, and Bob uses this opportunity to talk about how he, at that time, lived in Fairbanks, Alaska, and how he absolutely, just loved wintertime and all the beauty that it brings. Got my 1-inch brush there that I've loaded up with titanium white, and I'm just twisting it into the middle there to form the actual sun. In Bob's painting, he uses the knife to kind of clean off the excess paint, but I found that I didn't really have any, and I was really happy with just what the 1-inch brush had done, so I left it like it was. And now back with my 2-inch brush, just blending it all together. I'm going into the alizarin crimson, really picking up a lot of paint, and then just a little bit of the Prussian blue. You got to be careful because the Prussian blue is very strong, and it can overpower the crimson if you use too much of it. I'm just really loading it up there. Bob really emphasizes the importance of loading the brush full of paint. He says that several times during this episode, and so I made sure I was doing that. You can see I'm being really deliberate here. I did make sure that I was able to get the video playing at 75% speed for this episode, and it made a huge difference. I was able to relax a lot more. I was able to keep up a lot better. As you can see, I could be more deliberate and think things through, and I think the end product kind of shows that. Right now, just putting the shadows in, and by using this crimson color for the shadows, it's going to give the painting a real kind of warm feeling, or a real cozy kind of a feel, even though it's a cold winter scene covered in snow and ice. And I'm turning the brush to try and get some variation in the stamps that I'm kind of putting down every time I press it onto the canvas. Bend those bristles a little different every time so that it's not creating something that's too uniform. I used a little nicer canvas for this painting to give that a shot. I feel like it did help some. It reacts a little different than the less expensive ones. The way it was constructed was different, and I feel like that made a big difference. And as I'm putting in the shadows that are a little closer now, you can see I've darkened up that crimson color by adding a little more Prussian blue to it. This painting's a good example of how when you have things on closer planes to the viewer, you want to have them a little darker to help with that effect of depth in 3D. Turn my 2-inch brush there and pulling it down as straight as I can to create some reflections, and getting just a little bit more Prussian blue on there so that it's a little darker, a little waterier a little colder. Trying to make a decent sized pond, but not overdo it. And then going in really gently. This is just, super gentle to add a ripple effect to that water. I'm sorry about the camera flare-ups from this angle too. I thought I had that worked out again, and I apparently did not. I need to get a handle on some of this camera work a little bit better. I feel like the other camera angle's a little out of focus, so there's always some room to improve, not just in the painting, but also the production. I've got Van Dyke brown there on the brush, or not the brush, on the palette knife. Just putting in some trunks for the trees. Trying to do something that's fairly natural and not a complete straight telephone pole kind of tree. And I pull it out there and then kind of pull it thin and get just a little bit on the end so that I'm not globbing on too much paint at once. I'm going in with some highlight color there. Kind of curving it around to try and give a little shape to the trunks too. During this episode, Bob mentions to the viewer that they should write into the show and let him know what the viewer wants to see, what they think, how things are going. And I'd ask you to do the same. Always feel free to leave a comment down below the video, or you can drop us an email at becomingbob@gmail.com. You can see I'm adding the highlights there to the tree on the other side of the sun, and I'm putting them on the left side of the tree, whereas I put the highlights on the right side of the tree on the other side. You've got to make sure you're always keeping track of where your light source is, otherwise things won't turn out looking very natural. I've loaded up some more paint, more titanium white there, and just laying in some snow. One of the things I want to try and do this series is to include what I'm referring to as Bobisms, which is my favorite quote from that episode. I ran out of time in episode 1, so I didn't actually say that one, but I will do that now. So the Bobism from episode 1 is, we use no patterns, we do no sketching, we let it flow right out of our heart onto the canvas. I really like the way that sounds. I like the way that it describes the artistic process. I feel like it captures a lot of what Bob was trying to do. Switching out, I think I've got the 1-inch brush there, picking up some liquid white, and now dragging that through my titanium white to create a nice highlight color that'll be thinner than the crimson shadow color. and let it stick well. Like I said, Bob really emphasizes loading up the brush, so I'm really loading up the brush. Now we're putting in the highlights. The problems I have is that those first couple touches with the highlight color, if I have really loaded up the brush, sometimes those go on really sloppy, I feel like, and I just don't feel like it looks as natural as some of the later brush strokes, I guess you would call them. I'm just doing my best to, keep in mind where the sun is and create realistic tree bough shapes. So the Bobism from this episode, episode 2, is we spend so much of our life walking around, looking, but never seeing. And if painting teaches you nothing else, it will teach you to see nature, to appreciate some of the beauty that's around us every day that we take for granted. And that's definitely true. Since starting this journey, I've noticed, just the way I see things has changed. When I look at trees, I'm seeing their, branch structure differently. I'm seeing the way the leaves are, highlighted by the sunlight. It's, the way that reflections work in ponds. Where I'm seeing pictures of mountains and stuff. It does. It really changes the way that you see nature, and I think that it helps you appreciate it more. Yeah, like I said, I was able to be so much more deliberate in this painting than I was in episode 1 of this series. By playing it at that 75% speed, it just made it so much more relaxed and so much more enjoyable. So if you're going to paint along with Bob, which I definitely recommend, everybody give it a shot. It's a lot of fun, and you definitely can do this. I'm by no means a professional. I mean, you've seen me paint every painting I've done here on this channel, so, you can do this too. But if you're going to do it, I would, definitely recommend watching the video at a slower speed, especially for those first few that you're going to do, because Bob goes fast, and when you're focused on that painting and you look away from the screen, you might miss something important. Of course, the goal is not always to copy, identical to what Bob is doing, but, being able to follow along more closely does help a lot. And so as I'm putting these highlights on the tree, I start, kind of with the top side that's facing towards the sun, and then work down and from the right to the left. That, as I'm working, I lose some of the white onto the canvas, and I pick up some of the crimson color from the shade, and so it just naturally gets darker as I go along, and creates that natural gradient that you would see in the highlights on the snow. And now with that palette knife, just cutting in some sticks and twigs.
And you might notice that I do have a black palette knife. I did spray paint that when I did Series 1 with some flat black spray paint, leaving a little space along the edge clear. That's to help reduce glare off the lights. And it's just for the purposes of recording these videos. If you're doing this at home, you don't need to paint your palette knife. But if you see that and wonder why it's different, that's why. And that's a trick I definitely learned from Bob. Now back with that 2-inch brush. Gonna kind of go in since I put those snow drifts down and pull some of that down into the water. And you just got to try to be so straight here. If you look, you can see my hands shaking. I don't know why, but I was pretty relaxed while doing this painting, but my hand, for these really delicate parts, I just shaky. Now I've got just some liquid white there. Trying to cut off just the smallest little roll on the edge of the knife to go and cut in that water line with it. Again, like with pulling down the 2-inch brush really straight to make the water reflections, you have to be really good with your water line to make it as horizontal as possible, or else it just doesn't look right to the eye. And mine aren't exactly horizontal, so we'll get there though. Improving all the time. Bringing in another layer of snow. This one's going to kind of hem in our little pond there. Now, at the end of this episode, Bob goes into quite a bit of detail about what we'll be doing in the next painting. And actually, at the end of episode 1, he went into detail about this and told you to make sure you had your canvas ready with liquid white on it. Unlike Series 1, he gave you a little bit more of a chance to be prepared for the episode if you were actually going to try and paint along with it as it aired on PBS back in the 80s. But for the next episode, he tells us that we need to have a black canvas prepared. And for that, we just take a regular canvas and use a flat black acrylic, which later on in later series he refers to as gesso. And we paint that onto the canvas and let it completely dry. Then onto that black canvas, we'll be adding a few different liquid colors, not liquid white, but with that, it's going to create some real interesting effects. And so I'm really excited to do that next painting. And we'll probably start that canvas preparation today. Just kind of putting a little bit of snow out on the ice there. Got blown off the drifts. Switching back to that 1-inch brush, and actually I want to use the other 1-inch brush because that was the highlight 1-inch brush. So I grab my other 1-inch brush to do the shadows with here, and making some more of that crimson and Prussian blue, only this time making it darker, since this is going to be closer to us, closer to the viewer. Really loading that brush up. And just putting that in, really trying to follow with the lay of the land. Trying to make it look realistic and make these look natural. When you're doing your highlights, you want to make sure not to destroy all the dark, and when you're doing the shadows, you want to make sure not to destroy all the light. I want to make sure, there's some snow still laying among these plants. Now I've got my highlight 1-inch brush back out there, reloading it back up, and it's okay that I got a little crimson on it, because for the shadows on these closer ones, we're, or not the shadow, the snow on these closer plants, much like how we made the shadows darker, we're also going to make the snow color darker. And to do that, we're adding a little permanent red there. Just a little bit. That's catching the color of that sunset or sunrise. Or, maybe it's the middle of the day in winter and the sun just doesn't get that high. Trying to move the brush around and turn it so that it creates different shapes. The kind of variation you see out in nature. Of course, I mentioned it in the intro, but anything you can do to support us here is, always appreciated. Subscribing, liking the videos, making comments, letting us know how we're doing. This all helps. It's a good motivation for me to know people are watching, and just anything to help the channel to grow is great. Obviously, that's not my only motivation. Otherwise, I would have quit after Series 1. But it is still fun sharing this with people. And it wouldn't be the same if I was just doing it, off camera by myself. Something about this, filming myself that just, it adds a lot to it for me. Just putting in some more bare limbs sticking out there. Some scraggly old tree. Doing my best. These trees where all it is the knife have been a challenge in the past, and since Bob always adds them, at the end of the painting like this, it can really stand out and kind of, ruin the view if it doesn't turn out well. So yeah, you can see how nervous I am and how much that knife is shaking around. And just a little bit more snow, because the more of a texture you get there, the more variation, the more natural it's going to look. Especially closer up, you want to have those details. I feel like the audio recording for the paintings has gone really well this season so far. That microphone location there up on top of the easel, I feel like is it's really working out. Just adding highlights there. Got the script liner brush out. Putting just some liquid white by itself there along the edges of those kind of dead trees there. Of course, as you add liquid white, you're going to pick up whatever paint is underneath it. So I had to get a little bit more liquid white there so that what I'm putting on these highlights is, good and clean. Putting those on the left side, keeping in mind where the sun is. You can see I've got my pinky sticking out there, my palette hand. In episode 1, my pinky fell asleep while I was painting, and it didn't wake up for like a day. I don't know, just the way it was pinched was just perfect, I guess. So yeah, PSA, if you're going to be doing these paintings with a big, heavy palette like that, make sure you're not pinching your fingers. Really trying to, bring that snow around so that it's all in front of the pond. So that, the water doesn't just run off the canvas there and get all over the floor. Can't have that. Now getting a little bit of some linseed oil there, real thin oil, and pulling out the permanent red, nice and thin, thinning it down like an ink, which of course means I'm about to sign. And here again you can see just how I was having trouble with some of the details because my hands were just so shaky this episode. It's okay though. As I do these more, I'll get more confident. But thanks for watching this episode of Becoming Bob. I look forward to the next one. Like I said earlier, if you're not subscribed, please do. And if you like the episode, let us know. Thanks for watching. Till next time, friends.